Let me invite my friend, Dr. Richard Manab, the author of a very interesting book on innovative volunteering. Richard, with your so many experience in this sector, where, for example, without volunteerism, certain environmental issues would not have taken place. In Kenya itself, with the Nobel Prize winner, she stood against certain practices. Greenpeace has worked tirelessly on a voluntary basis. Now, Richard, based on your experience and practice at the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, how do you see volunteering evolve to emerging challenges, especially with your experience in East and Southern Africa, particularly in response to climate change impacts? And if I may also add that, how can volunteering adopt and innovate? Since this was at the center of your research and eventually your book, how can this innovation be integrated into global and regional social, technological trends and changes to volunteering? Thank you, Richard. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tapiwa, and to all colleagues who have already spoken, and especially with the trend set by the Honorable Minister. I love to use African proverbs because we have them in abundance. And the African proverb that we use to start to answer the question you've asked is one that says, where you will sit when you are old shows where you stood in your youth. And I will start answering this from the lessons before I go to the challenges that you've mentioned. And the lesson that we actually see from the work that we do in UNEP across the continent is that the challenge of climate change, especially within the developmental scope, cannot be addressed by government alone. It needs a whole of society approach. So let's face it, just about a week ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the 2021 IPCC report, which unequivocally pointed to the fact that we are contributing to climate change and that we have only 20 years to be able to surpass the 1.5 degrees, which, as we speak today, we are at 1.1 as the global community, 1.1 degrees. And Africa is warming faster than the entire globe. Research after research has shown that, and research in 30 countries, 60% of those countries showed that they were warming faster than the entire world. What is the point? The point is climate change is already with us today. If you look back just in 2019, Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Kenneth that affected many countries in Southern African region. When you come to the Horn of Africa, droughts that plunged millions of people, almost about 15 million people were in need of humanitarian assistance, resulting to food prices up to about 300%. What is the point? We then need everyone on board, and that's where volunteerism comes in. But volunteerism from the perspective that can actually be able to engage people to see it as an enterprising opportunity. And that is how the aspect of innovative volunteerism came, or where we can inspire people to turn their passions into profits, where you must not only be able to volunteer in institutions, but you can actually use yourself to retool your skill to contribute in turning a challenge into an opportunity. And therefore, the principles of seeing challenges as disguised opportunity and developing skills that can be able to turn that challenge into an opportunity is what we actually applied by engaging young people across the continent and inspiring them to retool their skill without necessarily having to depend on what they study, because what you study is important, but the skill that may be needed to help just develop a simple climate action solution like a solar dryer might help reduce post-harvest losses and turn a challenge of post-harvest losses by mothers in communities to opportunities. And as a result of doing that, the youth put money in the pocket and mothers put more food on the table. And one aspect that is quite very, very important is that we cannot be able to do this without inspiring one another. So we need to inspire young people, and by inspiring them in a way that they identify the reason why because the purpose of life is to be useful, and a clear purpose inspires what I call purposeful passion. And that's what has been missing in this equation. Volunteering sometimes is meant to be seen like a social endeavor, but it is not a social endeavor. It is actually an opportunity for someone to create enterprising opportunities to put more money in more pockets. Another challenge, the challenge that we are faced in the work we do, and engaging young people to volunteer themselves into the climate change space has been the aspect of a narrative. The narrative with volunteerism most of the time is seen as if it is a benevolence endeavor. It is a social endeavor. It is not a narrative of engaging everyone to be able to turn their skills into value that can fetch them money, to be able to turn challenges into business opportunities that can help them create impact in community as they put more money in more pockets. And that has been the issue. And then on your question on how volunteering can be adopted and innovated to address the changing global challenges, I think one of the aspects that needs to be looked at very critically is that if you look at the entire world and most of the African continent, the issue is not only policy. People have jokingly sometimes say that Africa is a continent, it's a cemetery for policies. When you're talking climate change, over 52 African countries have ratified the Paris Climate Change Agreement. When you're talking climate-smart agriculture, nearly every country have a climate-smart agriculture policy. When you're talking energy, fit-in tariffs, and the list goes on. When you're even talking climate legislation, Kenya, where we're speaking from today, actually in 2016, actually put in place a climate change bill law. The idea then is, how do we start to incentivize and engage everyone so that it can start to tap into that climate provisions or into those laws? And the point has been that we are missing the biggest constituents. We're missing young people who constitute 60% of the entire population of the continent. We're missing the informal sector that actually create over 80% of the jobs in the continent. And at the same time, we think that we can then be able to implement climate action without engaging them. So the things to do, the first thing to do is, first of all, we need incentives. We need incentives to then be able to engage the young people to be part and parcel of this transformational development, especially within the climate space. Let me just give an example. In 2016, Kenya actually scrapped the 16% VAT tax on liquid petroleum gas. In 2016, there were only about 9 LPG plants. Today, as we speak, there are 105 LPG plants. Why? As a result of policy, where ordinary citizens then took the advantage of an enabling environment to create their own enterprising organizations. It is the same thing that needs to be done, especially for climate action solutions like simple briquettes, like biogas, whereby if taxes are scrapped, if 16% that is currently there is taken away, it will incentivize young people to start volunteering their time to create their businesses. The last aspect is actually stimulus packages where policy will play a role. We saw what happened with COVID-19, where stimulus packages were actually availed. We need such for climate action, but these stimulus packages should be availed to be used by institutions that everyone is familiar with, like cooperatives, where young people can then be able to get access to finance and the informal sector. If we're able to do this, then we will be able to bring not only the whole of society to drive climate action, but ensures that economic is built.
Thank you, Richard. Excellent. The thing is about this topic so exciting and interesting. Do you have a parting word? Dr. Richard Monang.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tapiwa, my parting word is simple. Skills retooling is our own fierce urgency of now. Why? Because we must be able to offer value in turning challenges into opportunities. And only you as the individual can voluntarily volunteer yourself to retool your skill. A policy will not do it. A policy creates an enabling environment, but you have to seize the opportunity to leverage that policy to make an impact. Until then, we might be in for a long ride.
Interesting. Thanks, Richard.
You offer value to him by being useful to fellow man and to punish those who bury their talent.